everyone. I'm Michael Rosser, a contributing editor at Screen International, and welcome to this panel that might just save you time and money on your next production. We're going to be talking about going cashless on location and new approaches to handling finance on productions that can reduce spend while also increasing environmental sustainability. To discuss this, I'm joined by Simon Liddell, Director of Film, Music and Entertainment at financial technology business Centtrip, James Shannon, Business Development Manager at financial management specialist Moneypenny Services, and Gareth Jones, an independent production accountant who's worked on a string of Ben Wheatley features, as well as Chris Morris satire The Day Shall Come and Sky original drama Little Birds, among many others. Afternoon all.
Hi Michael.
Hello.
Now, the panelists are keen to answer any questions you might have, so please do submit those as we go, and I'll look to ask as many as I can later on. And after the discussion, I would encourage you to download a free report published by session partner Centtrip titled How to Better Manage Your Production Budget. This will be available via their booth within the platform, where Centtrip will also have someone available to talk through the chat function. But first of all, just to give us an idea of where we're going, let's quickly touch on where we've been and where many productions still are. So Gareth, perhaps we can start with you. I mean, in your work on films and TV series, can you talk about how you used to do things in terms of handling finance and the challenges you faced with all that cash on location?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, when I sort of started in the industry sort of over 10 years ago, cash was definitely still king when it came to petty cash spending. And it's got quite a lot of inherent problems, particularly if you are shooting on locations. The first and foremost is how you're physically going to get that cash. So setting up check cashing facilities is not quite as straightforward as you might think. First of all, you've got to find where your nearest branch is going to be, for example. I actually did a small shoot right up in the Highlands of Scotland. And in fact, it ended up with a mobile banking van coming round that allowed us to go and cash checks of up to £5,000 there. Because the nearest bank was an hour-and-a-half drive away along a single track road. So that's always going to be the initial problem. Where's the branch going to be? And then also, who is it that's going to be authorised to go and pick up the cash? Because usually the production company are going to want it to be somebody reasonably senior, which quite often will mean the production accountant or the financial controller. And obviously then that takes time out of the day that could be spent on other things. And then also where you're going to keep it. So if you are shooting on location, chances are you're not going to have a fully insured high security safe. Especially on a production where you might be needing to pick up sort of £20,000 a week. So obviously storing it is quite a problem. And then that's not even starting with the actual cash handling by your cashier and the amount of time that it can take to physically count and distribute cash. So yeah, when I started out, there were numerous challenges involved with managing the cash on a production.
Yeah, and I know you, James, as well. Can you talk about your experiences of dealing with cash on productions, perhaps when you worked in Belfast?
So working in Belfast or on several projects, I was that very cashier that would have to go and collect cash from the bank, which I had to be careful not to drive the same route over and over again. Had to park my car in different places to make sure that nobody, knew where I was going. Just very conscious of my own security, handling a large amount of cash. And then, like Gareth said, that took time out of my day to go and get the money and then come back, count the money and then distribute the money. So there's only so many hours in a day. So having to go and actually, get money and then bring it back, it's a job in and of itself. The other dimension to working in Belfast was that anybody who was not from Northern Ireland, any actors who flew in from London, for example, we had to be sure to book Bank of England notes, because if they got any local notes printed in Northern Ireland, they often would have problems spending that money back here in mainland UK. So it's, there's multiple layers that the cashier has to take into effect.
Mm. And Simon, I mean, I know that you've got experience in this field as well. So what kind of examples were you seeing with large sums of money on set?
Yes, Michael. I mean, it's a very common story. We started off in the music industry, and we've been kind of running cashless tours since around 2017 there. Cash is the bane of everyone's lives, especially obviously the guys that have to look after it, have to go and pick it up. I mean, we've got a case study that we did on our website actually, and a large client of ours was touring Japan. 300 crew members, an orchestra, and previously the tour manager would literally go to a bank in Japan, having rung up 2 weeks previously with 2 suitcases, fill those suitcases up with Japanese yen, scarily jump in a taxi to get back to the hotel, and then spend a day counting that out for the crew's per diems, putting it into envelopes, unable to fit it into the actual safe that's provided in the room. They're not great safes in the hotel rooms anyway. And then it would be crew that were then going out, runners handing out those per diems. Just a kind of crazy scenario like that. Obviously it had to be changed.
Yeah. So I mean, that's obviously the old way of doing it, and I kind of feel like that still goes on to some degree. But I wonder, Gareth, if you could talk about how you've changed your approach to this and the sort of benefits that you're seeing now.
Yeah, so it all it started to change quite a few years ago. Certainly for petty cash production spending, cards started to become more commonplace. But when I first collaborated with Simon and Centtrip, it was when I was working on Little Birds. And so we were doing part of the shoots over in Spain and then the rest in Manchester. And so I took the decision to use sort of the preloaded cards as both production spend and also for personal per diems, and actually go completely cashless on that production. And that actually worked incredibly well. Obviously, there's the added element of when you're in Spain, the being able to load the cards with local currencies. So the cards work in multiple currencies. So I could load euros onto the card for crew members. So obviously they then weren't losing out on exchange rates or foreign transaction fees when they were spending those per diems. And to be honest, it was a complete game changer, and I'm not sure I would ever go back to allowing cash again. Certainly not on the sort of scale that I'm used to seeing. The cards do have the advantage that in a pinch you can take cash out on them. Although I would always heavily discourage that where possible, because it's just another element to then have to reconcile against. But yeah, it was a complete game changer and something that I will now take with me on every production, I would say.
And I do want to ask you a little bit more about some of those benefits. But I mean, Simon, just to kind of bring us up to speed on these prepaid cards. I mean, I'm aware that something like that, was around in the US, but this has been something of an innovation that Centtrip's been involved with, right? Can you talk a little bit about, about those?
Yeah, I mean, prepaid cards have been around. They started in the US, mainly as kind of like a subprime product. People go to the grocery store, get a $50 prepaid card without kind of any sort of ID or checks, and use it online. Since then, they've come on leaps and bounds. I mean, our standard prepaid cards can hold £100,000 up to 350,000, just because of the size of kind of clients now using that, whether they be productions, big music touring artists. So the whole technology has increased behind that. Also, kind of the development of the expense management to cater specifically for productions, for TV and film productions, and how we report on that. I mean, but generally, as society as a whole is moving away from cash. Personally, I mean, I used to go into shops, and if I had to use my card on a low for a small amount, I'd apologise for not having cash, and I've got to use my card. Now, because of what's happened with the pandemic and everything else, that's kind of flipped on its head now, and I go in and I apologise if I hand someone cash and I don't have a card to pay for something. So there's been a huge kind of shift away from cash. Sweden, for example, I've got a friend who lives in Sweden. They're pushing for a cashless society by 2023. But just kind of so the prepaid card, we should differentiate as well prepaid from a debit and a credit card. The prepaid card is essentially like having your cash on a card. It's having that cash in your pocket. It's just on a plastic card or potentially on a phone. It's not a debit card that draws down from the account, so you still maintain control. So if you put £1,000 onto someone in costumes card, they can only spend £1,000. And likewise, it's not like a credit card in that there's bigger limits on that. And you have instant visibility. So whereas giving someone cash and then spending it and not knowing where they're at with it, with a card, that's not the case. As soon as someone transacts, you can see what's going on. So it's a great method to control spend, have a visibility on it, but do it a lot more efficiently. I mean, you've got to remember as well, we've got so many people working remotely now. It's impossible to get cash to people. We deliver the cards to individual people's addresses, and then the production accountants can then load the cards, and people can be dotted all over the country, but still obviously spending with the necessary controls in place.
Can they handle multi-currency as well?
Yeah, I mean, our particular cards can. Our particular cards can hold up to 15 different currencies on them at one time. They have an intelligent chip that reads where you are in the world and will draw the correct currency from that. But they work all around the world, so they're a MasterCard. So we've done productions in South America where they're just loaded with sterling. And as Gareth said, they're great for per diems as well, because we can give the crew the per diems in currency, and then when they come back, if there's anything left, we can convert it back into sterling if that's what they wish, if they're UK based, send it straight to their bank accounts, as opposed to them having cash that's never going to be sitting in a drawer for 2 or 3 years, or worst case, going to the bureau de change in the airport and getting clobbered for about 30% on the exchange rates.
And I mean, I suppose I just want to come back to Gareth then on that. It's clear that the benefits in terms of convenience and time saving and security, but in real terms, how much could a production save? I understand it'll be case by case, but how much could production save by going cashless?
You mean financially or time wise?
I mean, are there actual savings that can be made in a financial sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think interestingly, what Simon mentioned about how the shift has happened from feeling apologetic about making a small card payment to now actually often feeling more apologetic about paying with cash. I think that's reflected by the transaction costs for the two things. So it used to be that businesses, particularly small businesses, I think, probably had to pay quite a lot for card transactions because averaged out, the smaller transactions were actually costing them quite a lot. Whereas now, I have been involved in small businesses myself. Actually getting the cash out can become incredibly expensive. So on the scale of a production, the amount that you would spend getting out enough cash for both the production spend and everybody's per diems would be incredibly substantial compared to lower fees for getting the funds loaded onto the cards. So there's a definite financial saving there. Yeah.
And in terms of James, perhaps. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say, time-wise, if you think about it, if I'm going into a shop to pay for something with cash, I take the money out of my pocket I count the notes out. If I've got change, I can't count the change out. I then give it to the person. They recount it to check I've given them the right money, or if I've given them too much, they then need to give me the change. They put the money into the cash register, into the right compartments, give it back to me. I put it back into my pocket, which, it might be 20, 30 seconds, a minute. But if you roll that over every transaction someone does, or every transaction the crew are doing over any kind of TV series or film or whatever, and then roll it out over an industry, then that's going to add up. I mean, I obviously don't have the numbers, but that's going to add up to a huge amount of time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, James, I mean, perhaps you could speak to how the changes happening right now are enabling productions to go paperless. This seems to be another benefit of this.
Well, the benefit of a production going paperless, for example, using a company like ourselves, Moneypenny, if you look back in the way things used to happen, where somebody would have a paper PO book and you would sign up, you would create your PO, and then you'd have to give it to somebody to be approved, and then a paper invoice would arrive in, and then that would have to be given to somebody to approve. Again, paper is touching someone's hands, and somebody has to bring that from point A to point B. But going paperless, things are done in real time. You no longer have to pay a production runner to take documents out to somebody to be looked at and approved, and bring them back again to the accounts for them to input. So our software allows productions to have real-time POs communicating with the accounting software, where invoices can be connected in real time, invoices can be sent out. You're saving man hours, you're saving money on having to hire somebody to transport documents from that point A to point B, and you have a better understanding of what your costs are on the day, as opposed to having to wait days for things to come back to the accounts team. Also, one of the things that often happens is, from the time somebody brings documents out to somebody to be approved, you would often find that documents would go missing. Somebody would hold on to an invoice, or a PO would get stuck in the back of something, and you would lose documentation very easily. Now, with digital systems, there's full traceability, there's full audit trails. We have clients who are now doing full digital audits using our software. Again, saving. Some auditors may give a price reduction for doing a digital audit. So there's substantial savings to be made by going paperless using a digital software.
Yeah, I understand you were part of a case study tracking paper usage on a TV drama production. Can you recall some of the headlines on that?
So Gareth there was working on that show, Little Birds, and we in Moneypenny knew that there was a cost saving that a production could have. So we worked with Gareth to document what would happen on a production, and the different elements that could be done paperlessly. And at the end, when we reviewed all the data, there's a saving on Gareth's production of almost £13,000 just within the accounts department. If it was the entire production, it could have been upwards of 20,000 or more. So the other benefit of this was actually the impact on carbon emissions. There's a growing trend towards productions being more environmentally friendly. So that's the second knock-on impact of going cashless and using a digital system as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
13,000. Sorry, Michael. The 13,000 saving was purely in the physical material side of things. So in terms of paper and printers and what have you, that doesn't take into account any time saving. Yeah, any labour. That was purely on the physical side of things.
If we take into account, if you take into account, if the accounts team have to employ somebody to have somebody input data from pieces of paper, we're talking like one person a week. So that could range between a trainee up to a first assistant. So you could be talking anywhere between £600 and £2,000 plus a week savings.
And Simon, you mentioned a little bit there about how we are moving, more towards cards in society in general, and obviously during the pandemic. I wonder if someone wants to take the question about the benefits of going cashless and paperless as the pandemic goes on. I mean, are there benefits there?
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think every business, every person should be questioning their sustainability and what they're doing as a company, as a business. Not just around paper, plastics, everything else. Obviously we're looking at the cashless side and the cash finance part of this, but paperless is equally important. I mean, for us, we noticed that our expenses, for example, a couple of years ago, we were still filling out expense forms and stapling receipts to the back of bits of paper. At the time, we didn't have the ability to photograph receipts on our expense management. So we built that so we can now do that. So now it's just a case of when we spend on our cards, we take a photograph of the receipt, we add a description of it, and then the report is basically now our expense management, our expense sheet. So no more photographing receipt, and no more stapling receipts, no more scanning receipts onto A4 or whatever else. But it's an ongoing thing. We're not perfect. We're striving all the time to improve on all these things.
Yeah, and sustainability is of such increasing importance all round. But James, I wonder, going paperless during a pandemic, I mean, is there a benefit there, to kind of not be physically handling things as things go around? It seems, that's...
Well, the guidelines that came out last year came out just at the same time that we and Moneypenny had developed our invoice approval system. So again, going back to the fact that somebody doesn't have to touch a piece of paper means that it's better in terms of health and safety for reducing transmission of COVID-19. But also because we have something that's been digitally, it means things can be processed quicker and in real time. And just going back to Gareth's production, where we did the case study, Gareth's accounts team didn't put a single document into archive storage. I mean, the saving on that alone would have actually paid for the entire Moneypenny software. So, and that's just on one small element of not having tangible pieces of paper.
Yeah. I think the other thing with the pandemic is it's actually becoming more common and more acceptable for particularly accounts team to be, at least some of them, working remotely. I think there still is a case for some of the accounts team being in an office and being accessible to the rest of the production. However, I don't think it's necessary for absolutely everybody to do that. And if you're any kind of paper documentation, if somebody's working remotely, potentially hundreds of miles away, then you've got a problem if they're part of the approval process. So obviously anything that can be digitized, that sort of streamlines that approval process and makes working from remote locations or different locations much, much easier, which I think has become far more acceptable and a lot more important in the last year to 18 months.
And also because there's so many projects happening at the same time, there's the problem with getting accounts people. So if you're not able to get somebody physically here in the UK, you can have somebody working in different parts of the world on our software. They don't have to be in the UK.
Because am I right in thinking, Simon, that you got lumbered with a lot of paper after one particular production?
Yeah, I did dabble in the film production space a few years ago, and amazing experience. But I was the man that got left with picking up the boxes of all the files to look after for 7 years in case we had a review from HMRC. But that 7 years is now up. So my wife's very happy now that I'm not lugging around 12 boxes full of ring binders. But that was what was done then, and it's crazy looking at that now. And me looking at these expense forms, as I said, that are just pages and pages of receipts attached to A4 bits of paper and bus tickets and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think everything has moved on a lot in the last year. It's a bit like digitally wise. We've had to change things up. Listening to the first speakers today, Zoom meetings, meetings not overrunning, time, managing time better. So if you have a meeting now that ends in an hour, it ends because a new one starts. Things have definitely come on, and that digitalisation is kind of at the key forefront to that.
Yes, for me though, even before the pandemic, moving towards digital record keeping was a huge step forwards, because everything's there, it's more accessible. I think James mentioned very briefly some of the auditors now working completely remotely. Literally just give them a login to the system, and that's all you have to do, rather than currying 12, 20 boxes of ring binders over to the auditors and them going through it, and the amount of time that it takes for them. But even on a production level, if I, as the production accountant or financial controller, want to go back and review something, knowing that the transaction itself has got that digital record, and I can easily get into it and actually check the invoice, rather than having to go and find the right file, A to Z, go through it and dig it out that way, it is massive. It hugely increases your ability to cross-reference things. And also, if you have a validation check from HMRC on one of your VAT returns or whatever, the Moneypenny software has got a facility to select certain transactions and then just export them in a huge batch, which you can then send to HMRC, who now do actually allow submissions via email for that kind of thing. Even on the production, during the time of the production, even before the audit, I think it's made a huge difference to how we manage that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's right to that. It's same with the receipts as well. You can go on, put a merchant's name in, and then we can find that receipt instantly, and you can pick that receipt up, and as you say, send it as a zip files of receipts if that's what the guys are asking for. But as opposed to going through a load of folders trying to find that one receipt that's stapled to another 20 receipts. It's a big change.
But going back to our crew working in the days of paper, they would have to come into your office to actually hand you whatever it is that they want to hand over. So again, it means that they don't have to actually come and spend time out of their day traveling to a production office. They're able to do it from their phone. The phone now becomes their de facto computer. So everything is way easier to process.
And I know that this panel is very keen to take any questions that you might have, so please do submit those. We've got the experts here, do pick their brains. And I know that there's one viewer in particular who wants to know if major production companies, studios and streamers are adopting this as part of their post-pandemic strategies. Are you seeing changes there?
Absolutely.
I think I can probably take this one. So yes, it's probably a little bit slower on the uptake, but since COVID, I have done a couple of jobs where studios are involved, and they are now far more accepting of digital solutions that perhaps they wouldn't have been. The American style of doing things is printing everything out in triplicate and printing your checks and what have you, but they are sort of understanding the need for these kind of digital solutions. So there is definitely a move towards that. I think as long as you can demonstrate that these processes meet their approval requirements, which a lot of the digital solutions, Moneypenny or DPO or whatever, they have very specific ways of being able to set up who sees what, who has to approve what. I think if you can demonstrate that quite clearly to whoever it is, at the studio or the broadcaster that's got concerns, a lot of those concerns can be alleviated. So I'm very hopeful that they will take off. And even some of these jobs that I've done haven't been on the Moneypenny software, but we're still using digital record keeping, using some cloud-based, whether that's Dropbox or whatever. I think that is the future. The problem with doing it that way is it's a little bit more difficult to manage, in the same way as you had to, invest quite a lot of time in filing your paper accurately so that you could find it. Exactly the same applies digitally. You have to have a good file name system. You have to make sure that everything gets named correctly and goes into the right place, which is the great thing about the Moneypenny solution, that that responsibility is taken away from you by the system. But yes, I think that they are starting to become more accepting of the digital solutions, which is great.
Is that something you're seeing as well, James? Yeah.
Absolutely. There isn't I could probably list off studios right now that are using our software, but I won't. But the key thing is that every studio that I've seen is adopting to going paperless. As Gareth said, North America seems to be a couple of months behind the rest of us here in Europe. They do want that extra bit of reinsurance. When a project is over, we give them back the entire filing cabinet, which basically what Moneypenny is everything is searchable, indexable. They can ingest the data into their own system. So there's a definite move towards digital from a global perspective.
And another question that we've had come in is that, talking about different territories there, is that clearly there's a very strong infrastructure for card use here in the UK and in the US and whatnot. But are there any territories where going cashless is more challenging? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I can take that one. I mean, obviously, the more remote you get, there can be some challenges. If you're halfway up Kilimanjaro, I think you're going to probably struggle to find a point of sale machine to pay for something, or in the shop. But it's a MasterCard, so I think MasterCard's accepted in 35 million places around the world, or whatever the number is. So wherever the MasterCard sign is, you can use the cards. You can take cash out of them as well. We do realise that sometimes people may need cash if they're buying something from a market and that seller doesn't have the ability to use a card. That a lot of the times we will disable the ATM. We'll be asked to disable the ATM ability, but it is there. But yeah, I mean, we are doing shoots all over the world, as I said, in South America, in Asia, in fairly remote places. It just depends on, as I said, if you're going to a very remote village somewhere, they're more likely to obviously take the local currency in cash than maybe they don't have a card machine. But yeah, I mean, there's also there's things on the app where you can search for the closest MasterCard ATM. So if you are in an unfamiliar territory, you can go online as long as there's a signal to find that place as well. But yeah, I mean, as I said, it's pretty much globally, the globe's covered.
And how have, this is another question from the audience, how have auditors responded to the move towards going cashless and paperless? Who'd like to take that?
I mean, from my experience, they're very, very positive about it. As we've already mentioned briefly, now you can send them a remote login. They don't have to move from their desk to be able to access the entire data file of the production. And also from a cashless point of view, the great thing about using the cards is the record keeping is there. So even if somebody loses a receipt, you've got a very clear digital record of where the money was spent. So it's far more auditable than cash ever was. So it's been incredibly positive. Every audit that has taken place or that I've been involved in since going digital has gone very, very smoothly. So always on the paper ones, you get after a few days into the audit, you get a huge list from the auditors of questions or things that they can't find straight away because maybe they've been misfiled, or maybe the supplier name isn't quite as it is on the system, or whatever. Whereas the digital solutions kind of take a lot of that away. So you can actually move straight on to the more interesting questions that the auditors need to get to the bottom of, rather than sort of, I won't say wasting time, but certainly having to spend time just finding things that are just in the wrong place or whatever it might be. So yeah, my experience is they're very positive about it.
Finding things and then scanning them again. So, I mean, you're taking a step out of the equation, having to have somebody scan documents and send them to the auditor. So, from my point of view, what I've seen is digital audits have been happening. It's just somebody would have to go and get a piece of paper and scan it and then send it to the auditor. So now we're just removing paper completely and everything's being done digitally.
So a lot of changes is clearly happening. But there also seems to be room for more development. Gareth, perhaps maybe I can come back to you. Are there areas where you'd like to see further improvements made?
Well, I think in terms of like the actual accounting side of things, so how things integrate with the account software. So there's been absolutely huge steps forward since I started. So back to the days of the paper receipts, and I used to sit there as an assistant accountant when I was learning the business with the adding machine, the calculator with the till roll, and working it all out manually, and then I would have to sit and physically type it all into the accounting software. So we've moved on from that, and generally speaking, there's sort of Excel templates and things for getting petty cash transactions uploaded, which is helping. But I know that Centtrip are working towards a facility where that can become direct out of the Centtrip platform and into the accounting software. And so I think anything like that where it can become more integrated, because not only is it time saving, but it also reduces the chances of mistakes, because if you're exporting the actual card spend directly into the accounting software, there's no chance of somebody miscalculating or mistyping the VAT amount or whatever, which you might not spot at the time. So, I think there is still scope for improvements in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moneypenny is actually.
Sorry.
I was going to say Moneypenny are actually in the middle of actually programming our online petty cash solution, which will be available on the portal. So our portal will be the one-stop shop for all your crew members to be onboarded, to be contracted, for POs, approving invoices, and also for petty cash.
Yeah. And Simon, I was going to say, can you perhaps give us a sneak peek, a little hint as to what you guys are developing?
It's exactly what Gareth said. And going back to the question regarding the major production companies and studios, we're feeling a lot of pressure. They want to digitalise everything, make everything run smoother. So there's been big jumps in the last kind of 6 months around how we report these transactions, how we can make it not only life easier for the production accountants, but also the crew members, so the crew members don't have to fill out petty cash sheets. So we're well on the road with that, down the road with that. Our public API is ready. We're just waiting now to start connecting up with companies like Moneypenny's to offer that straight through solution where the two softwares speak to each other. So, when something happens at Centtrip, it's immediately reported in Moneypenny's, and Moneypenny's can make adjustments there, which then go back into Centtrip. So our developers are working on that as we speak. It's exciting times ahead.
I just had one more quick one for Gareth then, which is that obviously, there's a lot of tech savvy and not so tech savvy people out there, but do you ever come across members of the old school, let's say, who sort of refuse to adopt these new methods, and how to deal with that?
Unfortunately, yeah, I think there is still a small contingent out there who, as you say, tend to be the slightly more old school who have maybe been in the industry for quite a long time. But personally, I think it's actually, we have a responsibility to encourage those people to take the leap and start taking advantage of the new systems. And so I will initially obviously try and support and encourage and say, well, look, these are the advantages, so let's go through it together and let's get this system working for you. And if then it still continues to be, oh no, I do mine on paper, then it's like, well, I'm terribly sorry, but you'll have to find somebody in your department that's willing to do that for you, because my department will only accept it in the new format. That's the rule across the board. And I think if you're firm but fair, but offering an element of support, I think it is definitely something that we can all work towards to make it completely the norm and accepted by everyone.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good note on which to wrap. I'd just like to remind you to download that free report published by session partner Centtrip, titled How to Better Manage Your Production Budget, which is available via their booth within this event platform, where they'll also have someone available to talk through the chat function. It just remains for me to say thank you all out there for joining us today, for your questions, and especially our panel, Simon, James and Gareth. Thank you so much.